We're back again with the Cherokee, and today we're going to be replacing the rear drive shaft. We've been getting a loud squeaky noise from under here, and it sounds like it's coming from this area. So we went ahead and removed the front drive shaft, and the noise is still there. So we're going to go ahead and replace the rear drive shaft. We got a replacement from Rough Country. So I'm going to take it off and I'm going to show you what we got from them. It was the same thing, same as this one, and we greased the U-joints before we installed it, and it still went bad. Before the noise, we had a, like, it seemed like a loose U-joint, had a very small amount of play, and then out of nowhere it just started making more noise. So we're gonna see if that's the issue. So these are 13 millimeters or a half, and these are 8 millimeters right here. So we're gonna go ahead and remove all these. So there's 4. So this is a side-by-side. This is the new one. This is the one that we just removed, and they're both from Rough Country. The only thing I've noticed that is different, the U-joints on the new one have this fitting for the grease, and then on the one that we removed, it had these fittings. So you can see that ball thing right there, I forgot what it's called, but that's what shot. It started making noise. And let me see if I can show you guys. It's hard to spin it right now, but it's kind of like oh, there you go. So it's kind of like a squeaky noise. We're gonna grease this one up a bit more, and then we're gonna throw it on the Jeep. But it was kind of one of those things where we kind of knew it was going out until it got loud, and now we're replacing it because this had play, and I know these U-joints shouldn't have play. So let me go ahead and grease this up. We have that needle fitting. I'll show you guys right now. We picked this up at AutoZone. So it comes like this. It's like a little needle thing. That's the part number, W54216. That was like 10 bucks. So the grease gun didn't come with this. We had to get that. So we just put this in here, and then we have to thread it on, and then you put that side onto the grease gun. So this is what it should look like, and that end goes into that little fitting right there. So I'm gonna grease it up real quick, and then we'll throw it on the Jeep. Like that. I don't know if you guys can see, but there's grease in there. We hate using the grease gun because it gets super messy. The new drive shaft came with these new bolts, so we're gonna use these, and then we're gonna use the same bolts that were on the rear diff. So there's no way to get this wrong because these front bolts are half and these rear ones are 8 millimeter. We need to replace this speedometer gear O-ring. It's leaking a little bit. So I'm gonna have to do this with 2 hands. I'm gonna have to place it in here, put the bolts in a little bit, and then get them a little bit tight. While we're down here, and before we rotate the whole transfer case, we threw on the front drive shaft, and we're gonna throw on the bolts as well. So these are 8 millimeters, and these up front are 8 millimeters also. Now both drive shafts are in, and we're gonna take it around the block and see if the squeaky noise went away. So the squeaking went away. Now we're gonna move over to the steering box to see that we have a pretty big leak, and we think that it's coming from the seal that's right here on the steering box. So we're gonna go ahead and remove this cover. It's like 3 15 millimeter bolts holding it in. We're gonna drop that so we can get some access to the steering box. And we also have 3 13 millimeter bolts right here that have to come off. Now that we have the skid plate off, we're gonna have to get a 30mm and get to this nut right here. We need to get the pitman arm puller from AutoZone so we could remove it from here. Remove the pitman arm from here. And what else? I think that's all we need. Then we'll disconnect the lines and the shaft right here on the top, and the 3 bolts that hold the box in. So in order to get to the shaft, I'm gonna remove all this from the intake and remove the intake box. There's only a couple of clips, and this should be able to go to the side, and then there's 3 13mm in here. Now we have to get to this bolt right here and pull the shaft back. We already made sure that the steering wheel is straight. So we undid both 18mm hoses that go from the reservoir and the pump to the steering box. We have the steering wheel straight. We couldn't pull it out. We have to drop the steering box and undo it from the shaft. But someone has to be in there holding it straight so it won't rotate, because it ain't gonna be off on the steering wheel. Now we have to get to the bolts right here. There is 3 bolts. I think they're like 15 or 16. So we're gonna undo those and the steering box should drop. We're gonna have to do that with 2 hands. We're not gonna be able to show you. So this is the steering box that we got. This is the one that came off. And we believe that this is what was leaking, this seal right here. They go bad, and then with the big wheels, I think it puts more stress on this shaft and it tears up the seal. So this is the core now. We're gonna throw this one on. This is, I think, a rebuilt unit. I don't think it's a new steering box. So to throw this back on, we have to put the shaft in first and then bolt it up to the frame, because once the bolts are in for the frame, you can't install this. And it comes with some instructions and 2 new O-rings right here. So these are the instructions. You have to bleed the system, and you have to replace these on the lines that go in here. So we're gonna throw this on real quick, and like I said, we're gonna install this first, then bolt it up to the chassis, and then we're gonna do the 2 lines that go on top. Now we're gonna go ahead and replace our O-rings that come in the kit. So this little O-ring, I think it's a one-time use for these things. We're gonna replace them with the ones that they gave us. And there's 2, so one is for the pressure side and one is for the reservoir hose. So I'm gonna put those on and bolt these lines back up. We got the lines hooked up. We got the shaft bolt in. All 3 bolts for the steering box are in, spacers in. So now we have to put the pitman arm back on the shaft, and I think that should go to like 160-ish. We're just gonna use the impact. We're also gonna throw on some blue thread lock and the locking nut that comes with it. Now we're gonna top this off, and we're gonna follow the instructions to bleed the system. So it just says to top it off to full cold level, and then wheels off the ground, check fluid, turn the steering wheel at least 20 times until you see no air bubbles. So that's the full line right there. I don't know if you guys can see it right there. So we're gonna top it off until that. So the reservoir is leaking. It's a big ass leak coming from, I think it's the O-ring somewhere in the power steering pump. So we have to go to AutoZone, get another power steering pump, and then come back and replace it. So I'm gonna have to pull the intake box back out so I could get to these bolts from the side and the ones from the back and all that. Well, just for that bolt, actually. I don't even know if I have to remove it, but I'm gonna remove it just to have the space. And I have to get new O-rings for this one. We finished the power steering pump swap last night, and today we drove it for a couple of miles. I think like about 30 miles, and it seems like the leak is gone. There's still a lot of the old fluid right there and all over the place right there, but there's no new puddle right here. So that was our issue. The steering box and the pump was bad, and also the steering feels a lot stiffer now. Next, we're gonna have to get to this tie rod, swap it out again because the boot is damaged, or just replace the boot, one or the other. That's it for this video. Make sure to check us out on Instagram at Yonke_OXC Films. I'll leave that in the description down below, and we'll catch you on the next one.